back to Horseplay. Today we are going to cover the installation of a BMR adjustable upper control arm and BMR adjustable upper control arm mount on our 2014 Mustang GT. Here you can see the part numbers of the BMR products that we're using. BMR is the industry standard within suspension components. The left hand side is the upper control arm, and the right hand side is the upper control arm mount. On the upper control arm we have 1/4 inch construction, which makes it vastly stronger than the factory component. It's also adjustable for the overall length, which will determine your pinion angle, which can help increase your traction, whether it be for drag racing applications, whether it be for on the road, or whether it be for road racing events. It has a polyurethane bushing to aid in comfort while you're driving on the street. It also has a grease fitting. The mount itself has a large bolt that's included to mount the control arm to the mount itself. There's 3 mounting positions that you can select from to change the instant center of the rear. These components would be ideal for installing into a Mustang if you're experiencing wheel hop, or if you've increased your horsepower and are having traction issues at the drag strip. These are excellent components, and these can handle well over 1,000 horsepower in Mustang, Shelbys, and GTs. This would be an excellent upgrade over a stock component, or even an excellent upgrade over other companies' components. We decided to install these BMR components into this car. This particular Mustang, we've already got several suspension upgrades too. We're just looking for a little bit more traction and just to round everything off. The way that this install starts is actually inside the car. You're going to want to remove the lower seat portion of the back seat. This one's already pre-loosened, but underneath here there's 2 tabs, one on either side of the seat. I'll pull this out to show you more detail, but you're going to depress these tabs in, pull up. The lower seat cushion will actually come out. To access this one 24mm bolt. Here's one of the 2 tabs we were talking about earlier. This way you can see a little bit better. This is on the bottom side of the rear passenger seat. This would be in the front of the car. The other tab is on the other side. It's identical to that. This is actually what we're depressing in, is this small tab here to release the seat. Once you have the rear seat removed, this is the bolt that we take out first. It's a 24mm. You're going to want either some very strong impact tools, or you can do it by hand. And there we have it. After you remove the 24mm bolt from underneath the rear passenger seat, the next step is you're going to want to get the car up into the air. Whether you use a lift or whether you use a jack and jack stands, this is what you want to do next. You do want to ensure that your rear end can get as low as possible, so if you're using jack stands like I am today, you want to support the vehicle underneath the frame rails. Once you have the car up on jack stands and supported, you're going to want to put a jack underneath the rear end to give it a little bit of support and take some weight off of the bolt. The first bolt we're going to remove from underneath the car is actually the bolt that connects the upper control arm to the rear end housing assembly itself. You're going to need a 21mm deep socket for this. And we remove the nut off of this side. You're going to want to retain this nut, don't lose it. Once you have that nut off, you're going to give your rear end housing a little bit of support underneath the center section before we tap that bolt out. What we're going to do is we're going to hit this bolt out of the upper control arm and the center section of your rear axle. So just get a hammer. I put the nut back onto the bolt just loosely to protect the end threads. Get it started like so. Back your nut off a little bit further. Give it a few more taps. Switch over to a punch when necessary. Now this actually is under a little bit of tension, so you're going to want to keep an eye on it. Adjust the jack as necessary. And wiggle it through from the other side. Next, you can go ahead and pull your jack out from underneath the center section of the rear. We're done with that for the time being. The next step in the process is we're going to remove these two 18mm bolts that are holding in the upper control arm mount to the floor pan. You're going to need several extensions on a socket wrench in order to do this. There's one on the driver's side and one on the passenger side. Once you have the 18mm bolt removed on the driver's side, just repeat the process on the passenger side. Once the passenger side 18mm bolt is removed, you can remove the upper control arm and control arm mount as an attached unit. Here you can see the difference of the aftermarket BMR unit in comparison to the factory Ford unit. You can see the difference in the gauge of steel that's used on the two. Quite a bit thicker on this one, can handle a lot more power and give less deflection for your suspension. We're also going to weigh these. Doesn't seem to have too much information out there on the web about what the weight is, stock versus aftermarket, so we will give that to you next. On the factory Ford mount and control arm combination, you're looking at about 6.8 pounds as a combination. On the BMR upper control arm and mount, you're looking at about 8.8 pounds combination weight. So you have a couple pounds additional, just wanted to let you guys know that. What you need to do next is to separate the 27mm nut holding the upper control arm and the upper control arm mount from the factory units. I'll warn you, this is under quite a bit of tension, so you're going to need either a good strong vise or some good impact tools to do this. And separate the two units for our next step. The reason we separated the factory Ford control arm from its mount is so that we can set the new BMR control arm to the factory length. It is adjustable for length. You can do that later, but to get a good baseline on the car, you want to set it to the same overall length. So what I did is I put a 1/2-inch drive extension through this portion of it, and what we're going to do is we're going to put one of the bolts through here to try to get it lined up. Our BMR control arm is a little bit longer, so we're just going to shorten it up. Be sure to take equal adjustments out of both sides of that if you do need to add or shorten from it. Put the 1/2-inch drive extension back through that portion, recheck it. Still a little bit on the long side, so we're going to take it a little bit shorter. Once you have this set to the desired length, you want to make sure that we're even on the top, even on the bottom. You're going to have these jam nuts here. They're very large, so you might need an adjustable wrench or a crescent wrench. You're going to want to apply a little bit of blue Loctite on those and then snug those down. So we have our new BMR components set up. There's 3 mounting holes in this BMR controller mount. I'm going with the uppermost one. This would be mounted in the vehicle like this, so this would be the hole closest to the body. Put a little bit of blue Loctite on that. And we're going to put the BMR supplied hardware in there. The Ford OEM bolt won't fit if you're using this top hole because of this thick weld and the fact that they're using a 1/4 inch plate versus the stamped sheet metal. Once you have this on, you're going to torque that to 200 foot-pounds. Once you have your BMR set up pre-assembled, we're going to fish it back into the bottom of the car as a unit. Get your 18mm bolts started. One of those goes into the driver's side and one goes into the passenger side as well. Once you have the 18mm bolts started by hand, you're going to snug them down using a ratchet with some extensions. Once you have your 2 mounting bolts into the floor pan that are 18mm pretty snug, you're going to want to torque them to 85 foot-pounds. And just repeat the process on the other side. Next, to get the last bolt in from underneath here, we're going to jack up on the front of the center section of the rear axle to get the correct angle to be able to connect our upper control arm to the axle housing. Okay, cut. You may need to use a pry bar or some sort of other persuasive device to be able to get your upper control arm onto the rear axle bushing here. We had to use a little bit of prying action. If you have an adjustable panhard bar like I do on this particular car, you could adjust the panhard bar as well. There are pros and cons to that, but just a little bit of torque on that pry bar, we got it. I'm going to next put some jack stands here to get the angle of the center section just right to get this all lined up. At this point, a nice long punch like this will get that bolt hole lined up the last little bit of the way. And you should be able to slide your bolt on through. Next, we're going to install the bolt that holds the center section of the rear axle to the upper control arm. Just get it started, tap it through with a hammer. Once you get your bolt knocked through with a hammer, just get your nut back on. This is the factory bolt and the factory nut. We're going to tighten it up. One side of it on the nut is going to get a 21mm, and the side of the bolt is going to get an 18mm. To begin, we just want to snug this bolt up as tight as we can. I'm going to use an electric impact on this side. And then you're going to want to switch over to your torque wrench and do a final torque spec of 129 foot-pounds. Once we're finished up underneath the car, we're going to come back inside the rear passenger seat area to reinstall this 24mm bolt. Apply a little bit of blue Loctite. We're just going to get this started. get that good and snug, we're going to come back in here with a 2-foot torque wrench, and we're going to torque this to 240 foot-pounds. And there we are, hitting our necessary torque, 240 foot-pounds. So all that's left to do, once we have the car back down on the ground, is to reinstall this rear seat. It can be a little bit tricky. What we want to do is get the seatbelt buckles through the holes in the upholstery. One of the methods you can do is actually use the seatbelt itself, click it into there, and that way it'll pull it through once we start to lower the seat cushion down. Push it downwards with a little bit of force on both sides, and those plastic clips we showed you in the beginning of the video will hook right in. The tools that are going to be required to perform this job are going to be a good set of safety gloves, safety glasses, 2-foot breaker bar in 1/2-inch drive, regular hammer, a dead blow hammer, some sort of prying device or crowbar, an assortment of punches, a long punch, blue Loctite, a selection of 1/2-inch drive socket extensions, 1/2-inch drive socket wrench, a large crescent wrench. You're going to want a selection of torque wrenches capable of reading up to 240 foot-pounds at minimum. In our case, we used 2. One of them was a little bit less cumbersome. An electric impact gun will certainly help out, and just a small amount of sockets you're going to need: an 18mm, 21mm, 24mm, 25mm, and 27mm, all in 1/2-inch drive. This is a fairly straightforward job, but if you can afford for the day to have an extra set of hands, that's always a good thing. In my case, I have 8 of them, but they're paws. We have Lily helping out today, and we also have Gracie helping out today. Hopefully this video helps you out. Thank you for your time. We appreciate your viewing, and we appreciate if you could subscribe. Stay tuned for more videos from Horseplay.